Hey fellow garden gnomes, it's Brittany. Welcome back to my channel. It's March 15th and I'm finally getting around to starting some seeds. They're my earliest seeds. I always aim to start my onions and peppers around the end of February, but I kind of never get them in at that point. Which honestly is kind of fine because at this point I also need to do tomatoes, and it just kind of works out with how big my trays are. If I want to plant a whole tray at the same time, which I do, it kind of just works out better if I'm planting my tomatoes and peppers in the same tray. So I'm going to turn you around and I'm going to show you what I'm planting today. So this is a tray with 20 of these kind of trenches here. I'm not really sure what to call them, but I find that they work well for my onion and leeks, which of course are a type of onion, seeds, because the seedlings aren't going to be very big by the time I'm going to be transplanting them, and so it worked out well to just have them in this long kind of trench, and then I pull them up and I can sort of gently peel them apart. But I've decided that these red onions, I'm going to do 6 trenches, and then these white onions, I'm going to do 7 trenches of them, and then leeks I'm going to do 7. Now in the past, onions haven't done the greatest for me, but leeks have, and so that's why I want to make sure to definitely have 7 trenches of those. When I say they do well, I wouldn't even say that they necessarily get huge like the ones you would tend to find in the store, but they grow big enough, and I grow enough that when I chop them up, I can put them in the freezer and have enough to, throughout the following year, take them out and use them in various recipes. This tray, where it's full of these type plugs, I'm going to do 1 full of jalapeno peppers, 1 full Amish paste tomato, 1 full speckled Roman paste tomato. Then with this, I've put both Manitoban tomato and these golden nugget cherry tomatoes kind of in the same spot here, because I'm going to just do probably 3 of each. And then sunray tomatoes gets 1 whole tray, red acre cabbage gets 1 whole tray, broccoli gets 2 whole trays, and then my YOLO Wonder Bell and California Wonder Bell are sharing. I'll do 3 of each. Red Corno di Toro gets 1 whole tray. The Turkish orange eggplant and Casper eggplant share tray, although I think I'm going to do 4 Casper eggplant and then 2 Turkish orange eggplant. And then the artichoke get 1 whole tray. And the reason why some of them have to split a tray is because, of course, I only have so many of these little trays in here, and I don't think if I take all the seeds that are having to share, I don't really have enough to justify kind of planting 1 whole tray on its own. And so I kind of had to make some tough decisions about, okay, how many of these certain plants do I actually want? So I've made sure to have my labels all ready to go, and my seed starting mix, I've already pre-moistened it. So it's to the point where it kind of stays together a little bit, but it's not like I can't squeeze out water or anything like that. Basically, I want the soil to be moist for quite a while once the seeds are in it, and I will be putting these, once they're planted, I will be putting them on the bottom rack of my seed starting rack with a heating mat. And while I won't start them with lights directly over top, as I kind of keep planting more seeds as the season progresses, the lights on the upper levels will turn on, and some of it will get down to the trays that are on the bottom level, but the important thing is that I don't have a light immediately over top of that level. And that's because when you first start seeds, they just need moisture and heat until they germinate, and then once they do, that's when they get switched to an area with light. So I'm just going to pretty roughly try to fill all of these with my moist seed starting mix. And I kind of have to accept that, you know, some of the seed mix, starting mix, is going to get on the floor, and I'll just have to sweep up afterwards. So I'm really excited for this season. I've been at this place since January of 2019, and in the summer of 2019 is when I got a local person who had like a tractor with a till attachment to come and till up a big chunk of my yard. My house is on a 1/4 of an acre. I would probably say a little over 2/3 of the tilled area ended up being my food forest, and then maybe just under 1/3 of that area is now where I have 4 garden beds. The garden beds are about 4 feet by 20 feet. 2 of them have trellises all along the middle. Now that I have that, I'm going to just sort of take my pinky and make a slight indent. Anyway, I'm excited because I am planning to make some significant changes. So I've been planting since the summer of 2019. Although I didn't get the raised beds right then. I can't quite remember when I got them, but I want to say around like maybe 2021, 2022 I got the raised beds, because before that I had just sort of done my best to form garden beds with the soil, and I had just found they didn't work very well. And so I ended up making the wooden garden beds. So it's 2026 now. I've planted in those garden beds for a few years, and I've just had sort of poor luck. I haven't been finding a lot of success with them. And one of the things I definitely plan to do as soon as the soil is exposed, I want to send some soil away to a lab to get like a really detailed soil test done, because I've been using mostly almost pure seafood compost in my beds, and I almost wonder if that makes the soil too rich for the plants. Looking online, there are mixed messages. Some people say it's totally fine to use pure compost, and some people say that actually that's too rich and the plants will not like that, which gives me the impression that it probably has to do with the compost, because every batch of compost made is going to be a little bit different. That's why I want to get the soil test done, because I don't want to make any assumptions. So that's kind of my first big change that I'm doing this year. And then once I get those test results back, I'll try to make some adjustments, which may, if the problem is that the compost, there's just too much compost and it's too rich, I'm thinking I might get some bags of like black earth to empty on the top of my beds. Let's see, those are 5. Okay, one more. And then I don't know, I might try to mix it a bit, or I might just leave it for like the earthworms and stuff to basically mix in the top layer with the lower layers. Okay, so there. So I'm just gonna take my label and I'm gonna mark, because I did 6. There we go. Actually, you know what? These onion seeds only have a lifespan of like 1 year, so I might as well seed them a little bit more heavily, since it's not like I can preserve the seed. So the next major change that I'm going to be doing, although this will kind of depend. It'll depend on how my finances are doing. I'd like to get a deer fence to put around my 4 beds. I had always thought that it'd be nice to fence in like my entire property, but financially that's just not feasible for me right now, or anytime probably in the near future. And I definitely have a big problem with deer. There have been many times where I'll go out and all my nice seedlings that had been nice and healthy when I transplanted them out will be like partially mowed down or almost completely mowed down. And then they spend pretty much the entire season, because, you know, I live in Northern New Brunswick. I don't have the longest growing season. And so these plants will end up basically taking the entire season just to recover in terms of their vegetative matter. And then they don't really have time to actually produce any, fruits and vegetables or whatever it's growing. And so that's definitely something that I've sort of pinpointed, that like, okay, if I want to have a successful garden, I think I'm going to have to do something to prevent the deer from getting at it. Let's see, there's 4. That's 5. Okay, I'll do 2 more after this. And then also another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get codling moth traps to hang on my pear tree branches. And this is because if you saw my pear tree harvest from last year, I got quite a nice amount of pears. Unfortunately, all of them had kind of a black spot in the middle going through it that I had to like cut away, because I looked it up and apparently it's codling moths that got to it when they were young. The pears were young, and then as the pears matured and got bigger, the black spot kind of remained. And that was really disappointing, because otherwise it would have been a really impressive pear harvest. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be more proactive about squash bugs, because I've definitely noticed in previous years my zucchini plants get hit really hard by squash bugs, and I, as a result, end up probably getting barely any, if any at all, zucchini. And I've always been a little bit squeamish. Like, I know that usually people, they have to pick them off the plants, but I have been kind of squeamish about it, and so I haven't, and I've paid the price. My zucchini plants, as well as probably other squash plants, I mostly remember my zucchini plants, but I'm sure I've had like other winter squash plants that have also, basically ended up withering and dying. Okay, I didn't quite get to that last tray of leeks, but whatever. Anyway, so now I've put down all the seed, and now I'm going to just sprinkle some this on top to try and make sure that it's covering my seed. but I don't think I really need like a thick covering of soil. Anyway, so I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet this year and put on gloves, take a bucket of soapy water out with me, and I will pick off the squash bugs so that hopefully my zucchini plants and other squash plants will be able to survive. Trying to remember if was any. Oh yes, also, so another thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be planting several things outside earlier, because I've always sort of heeded the advice by like local farmers and stuff who are like, oh, only plant in by the full moon in June. And while it's true that that could probably be good for certain the plants that tend to prefer heat, so tomatoes, peppers, okra, squash, cucumbers, all that, there are plenty of varieties that you can plant before the average last frost. And so I was looking at the Farmer's Almanac planting schedule online, and there were several things that I could actually plant at the end of April that I had been waiting until the end of May, start of June to plant. One of those being potatoes. And so I'm really excited to plant those earlier, because in the past years, I have not been as successful with potatoes as I would like to be, and realizing that I could be planting them a month earlier makes me realize that by planting them earlier, I would probably get a lot more potatoes, which would be awesome. Other seeds like this are like peas, and carrots and beets and radishes, greens, spinach, and I definitely think that would work well, because I do find that if you plant those things in June, they're cool weather crops, but we tend to heat up pretty quickly, into mid-June, and so radishes at least would usually get quite woody. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just, before I go to the others, I'll just go ahead and plant my broccoli here. I just put one label per little tray. And I think I'll try to only put 2 or 3 per, because although I do want to leave room for some to not be successful, I also don't want there to be too much crowding before I'm able to get in there and thin out, so that there's only one per. Wait, I guess I only did that one. Talking and planting is an interesting thing, an interesting skill that I'm hoping that with more practice I'll be able to do it well. Also with potatoes, because I grow them in containers, I have usually been using seafood compost mixed with a little bit of peat moss. But I am starting to wonder, okay, is that maybe a little bit rich starting out? And so I think this year I'm going to, before I put the stuff in into the containers, I'm going to mix it in my wheelbarrow with some black earth. And so there's just a slightly lower proportion of compost. But then also, as the season goes on, I'm going to use organic fertilizer, maybe top up with some compost, because I do know that potatoes are heavy feeders, and especially when they're in containers, and so the roots are limited in how far out they can go to search for nutrients. I think that is the way to do it. So this is my red cabbage. In past years, I've grown a lot of cabbage plants, and while I do enjoy cabbage, I find that cabbage plants are so big as they grow. They take up so much space that this time I'm only going to do 6. At least of red cabbage, I think. I can't remember if I have some green cabbage seeds or not. I'm pretty sure I have Chinese cabbage, which I want to grow because I want to try my hand at making kimchi. So planting earlier, fertilizing, in addition to fertilizing potatoes, I want to more often fertilize other plants, although again, I'm going to wait and see what my soil mix says before I make any hard decisions about that. I also am going to try my best to keep it weeded better. Both my raised beds and my food forest section, which ideally it'll get to a point where I don't need to weed my food forest, because there'll be enough plants covering the soil that weeds won't be able to get established. But unfortunately, that's not the case yet because my food forest is still young. A lot of the trees are still small, and also I still have so much more space that I can put plants in, because reality is perennial plants can be expensive, and so I have only been able to afford to add a certain amount of plants every year. Sunray tomato, I'm excited about these. I love a good orange tomato. And again, I think I'll just put 2 in there so that there's some insurance if one of them doesn't germinate for whatever reason, but I don't have to worry too much about rival seedlings. That one was so much quicker just because, I could just kind of put soil in a large area and move it around without having to worry about. I don't want to get too much soil in this bottom tray if I can help it. First of all, it's a waste, but also it's just messy, I guess. So if any of you guys have some things you're looking forward to trying this year in your 2026 garden, please comment down below. I'd love to see what you guys are trying. Might give me some ideas. What else? One thing I'm excited to see is, 2 years ago, I actually inoculated some of the wood chips in my food forest area with 3 types of mushrooms. There are red cap mushrooms, it wasn't bluet, there was another, morel, that's what they are. This is Manitoba, yep, okay. Have to really remind myself that I'm only putting them in 3 of these trays. And then the golden nugget, cherry tomato, will go in the other 3. And then also last year I planted, was it last year? Or it might have been actually the fall before last year. I had planted Egyptian walking onion bulbs, and they came up last year, but I kind of didn't pay a lot of attention to them. I didn't really weed around them, and then I saw that some of them got kind of brown because there isn't any irrigation in there, and we had some dry times last year. So I'm interested to see if they survived. I'll be definitely disappointed if they didn't. And then also my strawberries. I've had trouble keeping my strawberry plants alive. One time they didn't survive the winter, and then I think other times they just haven't been able to get very big and strong because I haven't kept them weeded. A lot of this comes down to me just not weeding because it is a big space. I probably did bite off a little bit more than I can chew. I am going to still continue to try my hardest to devote the amount of time and energy it's going to take to keep them weeded, especially when my plants are young, because that's really when they are the most susceptible to not getting enough nutrients or water because the weeds are robbing them of that. So it looks like I actually have 8, so I might as well just put these extra 2 in there. I will either try, and if they do well this year, I'll try my best to save some seed for next year, or I guess I'll be buying new seed next year. I guess another thing I'm gonna do this year is with these seedlings just to be more on the ball with fertilizing too, because obviously they only have a small amount of seed mix to pull nutrients from, and while the germinating mix does start with some nutrients, as the seedlings grow it will be depleted. I wonder if I'm going to end up having to top up this or if I'll have just enough. No, I'm probably going to have to get a little bit more germinating mix before I can finish. Speckled Roman paste tomatoes. In past years, my tomatoes have been some of the, well, I shouldn't say some of the plants. Basically, hardly any of my plants have done very well in past years. But yeah, with my paste tomatoes, I'm hoping that this year, if they do well, then I will be able to actually finally can some tomato sauce, which has always been my intention with growing paste tomatoes. I'm always so optimistic going into the garden season, even though past years have been quite disappointed. But once again, I find myself feeling really hopeful that with these changes that I'm planning to make, I'll be overflowing with produce, because that would be a really cool feeling if I had so much that like I was giving it away or anything. I mean, I will definitely be preserving some, but you know, depending on how well my plants do, I could easily see myself getting to a point where it's like, okay, there's no point in continuing to preserve. I might as well just give it to people, give it to neighbors and friends and stuff. I think that would be fun, you know, fun to do, fun like community building kind of activity. For all that, you know, I've been here since 2019, I'm quite a shy person, so I don't exactly have the strongest connections with like neighbors and other people in the community. I'm sure going around and offering produce would be kind of a good way of putting myself out there and starting to build those relationships. So jalapeno is my only hot pepper this year. In past, I've had other hot peppers, but I've sort of realized that I don't really use the others because jalapenos are just the ones I know, I'm super familiar with. I know kind of what the spice level is going to be. And so I just figured, when I was picking up my seeds, I decided not to go too crazy and to sort of just stick with the seed varieties that I knew that I would use. And so when it came to hot peppers, jalapeno ended up being the only one that I really wanted to get. I mean, I do like Thai food, so I might have gone with the Thai chili, but the thing is, they're so small. Those peppers are so tiny that it feels like such a pain in the ass to use them. So I feel like I'm often discouraged from using them when I've grown them before. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go get some more soil and finish planting these 2 trays, and then I'll turn you guys back on to show you the finished product. Okay, here's my seed starting tray, which if you've seen previous seed starting videos, you've definitely seen this. And this is my bottom rack where I have my heating pad. Got my seeds started there. And I will keep an eye on them. Every day, every couple times a day, maybe I'll feel the soil to make sure it's not drying out too much. And I do have like a water sprayer for kind of the first little bit, because I find it's better to be able to water it without moving the soil around too much. So those were the first seeds that I planted for my 2026 garden. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you know of anyone else who would like this sort of content, I would super appreciate it if you shared it with them. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.